my paper, Where Everything is Silent, Time, Memory, and Fate in Dallapiccola's Il Prigioniero, explains how this 1948 opera presents a unique type of narrative temporality. This opera is the centerpiece of Dallapiccola's protest triptych, a set of 3 works composed between 1938 and 1955 in response to Italian fascism. Set in the late 16th century in a dungeon in Saragossa during the Spanish Inquisition, Prigioniero is at once both far-reaching and narrow. Only an hour in length and with only 3 main characters, juxtaposed with an offstage chorus, Prigioniero is uncomfortable to watch and experience. It is, in many ways, Dallapiccola's voice that speaks directly to us in this opera, protesting his own and his family's experiences of exile during the 2 world wars. First, the timescape of Il Prigioniero involves nonlinear characteristics that draw from the literary methodologies of authors James Joyce and Marcel Proust. Both of these authors were influential to Dallapiccola, specifically in how their prose techniques defied linear narrative. When Dallapiccola was becoming interested in the 12-tone system, it was the works of Joyce and Proust specifically that he found analogous to strategies he observed in the works of Schoenberg and Webern, including arrangement and polarity. His understanding of the 12-tone system at a fundamental level is rooted in its relationship to these authors' literary techniques. Many of his musical strategies have close parallels to the creative devices of these authors. This connection, along with Dallapiccola's predilection for self-quotation, borrowing, and other intertextual references, results in many of his works presenting varying degrees of temporal nonlinearity. But the temporality of Il Prigioniero is also uniquely impacted by the narrative themes of imprisonment, solitude, loss, and freedom. These themes are interwoven into the most fundamental elements, like the intervallic content of the constituent 12-tone rows, to broader categories like elements of the staging and orchestration. Many elements of the libretto, which Dallapiccola wrote himself and adapted from 2 earlier literary sources, work synergistically with the use of recurring motives, pitch-class centricity, rhythmic compression figures and proportionalism, musical symbolism, symbolic row forms, and other musical devices to suggest temporal distortion as a result of the psychological toll of imprisonment. The prisoner's experience of time also involves rhetorical oppositions of space, as his isolation and distance involves both closeness of space within the cell and the false friendship or closeness of the jailer, and the real physical distance from his family and the life he left behind. This juxtaposition is amplified as the prisoner crawls through the labyrinth of tunnels in the dungeon in the 3rd scene, both claustrophobically close and never-ending. It is also suggested by the mother's dubious presence in the 1st scene. I argue that the mother is not truly present here, and is a hallucination brought on by the prisoner's psychological turmoil. Claustrophobia, unsettling closeness, is often depicted in tandem with chronophobia, the fear of time, and the psychological anguish often experienced by prisoners. I explain how elements of fate are also interwoven throughout the opera, as exemplified by the offstage chorus, who I interpret as the voices of fate. The offstage chorus is also another example of symbolic oppositions, including those of the collective and the individual, while suggesting physical, temporal, and narrative distance. The idea that the prisoner was never truly free, but was subject to a predetermined fate, allows us to consider the character's statement of La Libertà, which closes the opera, in a new light.